I talked about a few months ago here in the video blog about my first ever WWE live event in November of 2009, Providence, Rhode Island, the ECW SmackDown television taping. Awesome experience. Little did I know that for the first time, that was for the first time in a year and a half that I had ever gone since I started watching wrestling to a WWE live event. I had gone to indie shows before, but never to a WWE show. Little did I know that less than a month and a half later would I go to my second WWE event. In the matter of only a month, I was going to another WWE event, and I wouldn't go to one for another, I think, year or so. I think in October of 2010, I'll talk about that in another video blog. That's another story for another day. So it was shortly around December 2009 that my buddy John, at JohnKnapp17, I've talked about him here in the video blog before, he was asking for tickets to Monday Night Raw in Hartford, Connecticut. It was only 3 days removed from Christmas, December 28th, 2009. It was that Monday, and he was talking about it that entire month of December that he wanted to get tickets. So I guess he said that he left the ticket window open on his parents' computer so they could check it out and hopefully get it for him. But again, it wasn't him, it wasn't his parents, it was Santa that got him the tickets, of course. So those of you still out there that love Santa Claus. But regardless, though, he ended up getting the tickets. He got 3 tickets for Christmas, and I get a call on Christmas morning. I forgot all about it. I'm opening my gifts and everything else. I think that was the same year that I got my Batista and Jeff Hardy documentary on DVD. I got my first ever camera. I was so psyched. Got a lot of awesome stuff that year. And so I was just enjoying my stuff, watching my Batista documentary, setting up my camera and everything else. And when I get a call from my buddy John, and he's telling me that he got tickets to Monday Night Raw. He got 3 tickets, one for his father, one for himself, and he said he wanted to give the third one to me and have me go along with them to the show, and I was super psyched. I asked my mom if I can go. She said yes, so I was so pumped for it, to go to my second WWE show in 2 months, much less a live one. This was Monday Night Raw. This wasn't a Raw house show, and I mean, like I said before, the SmackDown show that I went to in November was great and all, and it was taped for TV, of course, and I was still there for a historic event, whatever way you want to look at it, but it wasn't live. This was going to be live on television, the final Raw, no less, of 2009, so who knows what was going to go down. The only thing that we knew going into that show, that Timbaland, of all people, was going to be guest hosting, but I was still psyched for it regardless. So I was set to go. That was Friday that I got the call from John saying that he got tickets, that he wanted me to go with him. So pumped. So 3 days later, on Monday, I'm waiting that entire day to go to the show. I'm so pumped, making my signs and everything out of some piece of cardboard that my buddy, my brother Jackson had, just lying around. They're just like this big. You see the signs on TV, they look so small, but in reality, they're huge. They got to be huge, and they got to make the pen. If you're using black on white, if you're making signs and whatever, you got to make it like chalky and bold to make sure it comes across on television. And of course, this was long before I even knew where we were sitting in the arena. So of course, where we ended up sitting, they were null and void. Didn't even matter anyway. And I'll get to that in a second. But spent an entire day making signs, getting some money ready in case I wanted to buy some merchandise. Because at the SmackDown show, I bought a T-shirt. I can remember a T-shirt with all the wrestlers that were on the roster at the time: Punk, Batista, Taker, Kane, Cena, Triple H, Orton, everybody. And this was back when there was still a brand split. So it was pretty cool because in November I would be able to see the SmackDown ECW crew, some of my favorites with Punk and Regal and Christian and those guys. And then on the Raw show, I'd be able to see some of my Raw favorites. Of course, John Cena would be on the show, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, DX collectively, where they were at the time. They were still teaming at that point in time. So I'd be able to see a lot of my Raw favorites, including Chris Jericho. He was on the SmackDown show too, of course. He was tag team champion, or he was part of Jericho show at that time, so you'd be able to go on both shows. Big Show, The Miz, of course, I was a huge fan of at the time. He was going to be at that show. And I can't remember what the sign said. I had those signs for a very long time. I don't think I took a picture of them and put them on Facebook, but I did make a status about it or something like that. I know John, it's funny because I can't remember my signs, but I can remember John's, because John brought a few signs too. And the seats that we ended up getting were like the nosebleed seats. No one was even behind us. We were that far up in the arena. But like I said in my SmackDown, like I said in my first ever WWE event video that I made last month, it doesn't matter where you're sitting. It's different for every arena, obviously. Like some seats are better in some arenas than others. But for me, anyway, this is my philosophy. As long as you're in the building, that's really all that matters. Like, if I go to a WrestleMania someday, and I tell people that, like, I haven't gone to a WrestleMania, and they're just shocked, because as big of a fan as I am, I mean, granted, it's really not all that surprising. I've only been watching for 6 years, which is, very, very little compared to a lot of people. or 6.5 years, whatever. But I still have yet to go to a WrestleMania, if only because they don't really come around these parts. And, to travel across the country to go to California or Texas or Florida, it's a lot of money. And that's not even not even considering the amount of the price of the tickets that you're paying for, and throw in the airfare and stuff like that, and the merchandise, whatever else. It's a huge budget to go to WrestleMania, so therefore I haven't really gone yet. I almost went to 29, but I digress. Going back to the story here. So going to Monday Night Raw, we had the nosebleed seats, but it doesn't matter where in the arena you get seats, as long as you're there. Even if you're watching on the not the Titantron, but the video screens that are above the arena. I mean, it's different in every arena, but the arena that we went to, it's the XL Center. I think it was still being called the Hartford Civic Center at the time that we went back in 5 years ago, in December 2009. Now it's called the XL Center. Or it might be the other way around. I think it's XL Center now, and Hartford Civic Center is what it used to be called, but I digress. So it doesn't matter where you are. That's where basketball games were and stuff. So they had the big screen above the ring, and I took so many pictures. And if you want to check them out, they're on my website, Next Era Wrestling. Because like I said before, that Christmas I got my first ever camera. And funnily enough, and interestingly enough, that was the first ever event, because I took some pictures at a wrestling event that I went to, the one that I met Mr. Anderson at, which I talked about here in a video blog last month. But for my first ever camera, I was able to take a lot of pictures that night. I took so many from start to finish. We got to see a dark match. I think it was Santino and Paul. And going back to the signs I forgot to mention before, I can't remember my signs, but I can remember John's. One of them said, Kelly, Kelly, call me, which was really funny. And then his other one said, John Cena, we've seen enough, which was hysterical. I mean, it was still, nowadays you see it all the time, but that was when it was still fresh and innovative and funny. I thought it was hysterical, because that was before I was a part of the IWC, and I didn't really see much of those kind of signs on the internet and the crowds, whatever else. I was still a casual fan at best. But regardless, though, I took so many pictures at that show with my camera, and like I said before, interestingly enough, my camera was able to last. The battery power was able to last the entire show, with the exclusion of the dark match. There wasn't a dark match, but there was a dark segment when like DX and John Cena, maybe someone else, hit their finishers on Randy Orton, who was the top heel at that time. And I don't think it lasted for that long, but it did last for most of the show. It lasted for the Superstars taping, the dark match, like I said before, Santino and Burchill. So I really, really lucked out. I took a lot of pictures, and they're pretty quality pictures too, for as far back as we were. Sometimes those are get the best pictures, because you get the best seat in the house in terms of like being up above and getting the angle of the camera and stuff like that. So I uploaded those pictures to my computer like almost right after the event when I got home, because I didn't get home for a while, because they picked me up from my house and they dropped me off. And all those pictures are at my website, nexterwrestling.net, not deep.weebly.com. If you want to go to that website, you can. But nexterwrestling.net, if you want to go check them out. They're all up there. But the show, in retrospect, had I been watching on TV, would have thought it was a shit show. And John and I joke about it all the time, because we went to Raw this past year, almost 5 years later, on the June 30th edition earlier this year. Also in that same arena, same exact arena. Best WWE event, best wrestling event that I've ever been to be quite honest with you. I'll talk about that in a future video blog as well, with the return of Jericho and AJ and The Miz and everything else that went on that night. New Divas Champion crowned. So much stuff happening that night in Hartford. But, that was one of the greatest Raws. In retrospect, still one of the greatest Raws of 2014, if not the single greatest Raw of 2014. That Raw in 2009 that we went to, like at the time, this is so awesome, and of course, why wouldn't it be? It's the first Raw of 2009, or the last Raw of 2009, my first ever Monday Night Raw. So of course we're going to think it's amazing in the moment, but looking back on it, it was not the greatest show. It was a historical show in some senses, like in the Superstars tapings. Melina competed in her final match before getting injured. She had to be stripped of the Divas Championship the following week. This is all small stuff, but still. Chris Masters debuted his new entrance music. No more of the whatever music he had for the longest time. He debuted new babyface music that night. Miz used for the final time his or whatever that theme song was that he had for the longest time. Last night ever that he used that before going to I Came to Play. I think the following week on Raw, the first Raw of 2010. We'd also see tag titles weren't on the line that night. Timbaland made an appearance like I talked about before. Jericho, I think, maybe faced, or it was DX versus Big Show and Chavo, because I think Jericho was like banned from the arena or something like that. We saw a United States Championship match, Kofi Kingston versus The Miz, a very good matchup. Orton taking out Kingston on the side, which is pretty cool. We got to see the Legacy in action, MVP, Mark Henry. We got to see a WWE title match, which is also really cool. Like I said before, John and I still joke about this to this day. It was John Cena and Sheamus, and not in a tables match. I think it was a standard singles match of the WWE title. And Cena had Sheamus up for the AA, and Sheamus, we make, like I said before, we ridicule this all the time, but Sheamus like brushed the referee's shirt, Mike Chioda, and he just rang for the bell like it was a disqualification right off the bat. We were so pissed that we didn't get a definitive winner in that match, but like I said before, still a historic show in some senses. So it was pretty cool for the final Raw of 2009. Regardless of whether it's a shit show or not in retrospect, we can say that we were there for the final episode of the flagship show of 2009. Regardless of what you thought of that year, of that show, we went to Monday Night Raw, baby, and that was really all that mattered. So it was pretty cool. And I think it was before the show that we stopped by the merch stand. I was able to get some DX armbands, and I've worn those in so many of my videos. Like I used to wear those in all these videos that I used to do for YouTube. 2011, 2012. I had those for the longest time before I started wearing my CM Punk armbands that I bought at a live event a couple of years ago. I think about 2 years ago in October of 2012. But still, though, I bought the DX armbands that night, and I think that was all I got because I was pretty short on money. I didn't want to spend too much money. Those were pretty cheap, so I bought those. And I think I still have those to this day, or at least one of them anyway. I don't have them on me, but like not even on me, but like around me, bro. I can just show you right now. But still, that was pretty cool. But yeah, it was a pretty historic show in many senses of the word. And like I said before, just going into that Raw 5 years later in June of this year, an amazing show compared to the one of that year. And they were teasing Bret Hart. And yeah, it was the following week where Bret Hart came back. We had a tag team title match. We had so much stuff going on in the first Raw of 2010. Mike Tyson was on that show. So, for what it was, I really, really enjoyed it. And there's really nothing like going to your first ever episode of Monday Night Raw or your first ever WWE event, like I said in my last video blog when I talked about that, when I went to the SmackDown show. There's nothing ever like it. And we're on our way out. We're like, oh, this is amazing. What a great show that was, and whatever else. And some troupe that was there, they were talking about their experience going to the show. They were in the front row, and they were giving out. I don't think it was him that gave it to John. I think it might have been before the show, because it was right after Christmas. Some guy dressed up as Santa was giving out free DVDs. He gave John a free, I think some free WWE merch. I forgot what was in it, but I do remember one item, and it was the Jeff Hardy DVD that I had gotten for Christmas only a few days prior, and he got the DVD as well on that night. So that was a pretty cool commemorative gift for him. But his first episode of Monday Night Raw live, my first episode of Monday Night Raw live, I've gone to a few episodes since. I went to one this past year, like I said before. I went to one in 2013. So, you know what? Like I said before, regardless of whether it was a very bad show in retrospect or at the time or whatever, at least you could say that you went to an episode of Raw. I can certainly say that, and it was one hell of an experience. And it's just hard to believe that it was 5 years ago this week.